Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome to the first meeting of our physically distanced book club as part of our Unwind Live virtual event series. I'm John Cohn from KPCC in LAist. Today, we're delighted to have Vroman's Bridget Schinnerer, Nerdette's Greta Johnsen, and writer Eva Recinos take on Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. And we have more events to come. Unwind Live continues this Tuesday with the live video debut of Go Fact Yourself, the hit quiz show podcast. And our No Panic Guide live series continues this Wednesday with a live Q&A on social contracts, and I hope you'll join us for those. More info on all of our events at kpcc.org/in-person, where you can also sign up for our newsletter. And if you don't already, follow KPCC and LAist on social media for updates. If you're in a position in which you can support KPCC and LAist and all of the journalism that we are producing, especially now, we are always grateful for anything you can do, and now is very much the time to do so. Links to all these points of connection are in the comments section, where you can also share any questions or comments you have for this conversation. Without further ado, Bridget Schinnerer.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'm very excited to hear what people thought about the book. Now, full disclosure, this is my first foray into broadcasting, as it were, but no fear. I have a couple of professionals that are very much experienced in this sort of thing. Joining me today are Eva Recinos, a Los Angeles-based writer and arts and culture journalist, and Greta Johnsen, who is coming to us from Chicago, where she hosts and produces WBEZ's Nerdette podcast. Eva, Greta, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you. This is going to be fun.
All right. Now, as with any great books group, my book group, I know, we are all about the food and drink. And tonight, while it's not a fancy affair as I'm used to having at my lovely hostesses, I do have with me some cookies and a freshly brewed cup of coffee. Eva, what do you have with you? What are you snacking on tonight?
Uh-oh, Eva, I think you're still muted. There we go.
Here I am. I just have a glass of red wine that we got from our local corner store, which happens to match my shirt. So, I figured that would work out.
Very nice. I have a glass of bubbly rosé, and I don't have any snacks, but I did bring my knitting, which I will be doing as we chat.
Excellent. All right, well, let's recap the book a little bit here. Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine is by Gail Honeyman. It is the author's first book. In addition to being a #1 New York Times bestseller, it has won several awards, including the Costa First Novel Award. The book was longlisted for the 2018 Women's Prize and was named one of NPR's Great Reads. Here's my brief 1-minute recap of the book. Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine tells the story of a 29-year-old woman who is living a solitary and lonely life in Scotland. She follows the same routine every day, the same crossword puzzle, the same lunch, etc. She spends every weekend doing the same thing, which includes drinking 2 bottles of vodka, and her weekends are spent without speaking to another living soul. She works in an office, and while she does interact with her coworkers, she doesn't seem to enjoy it. Eleanor has found a way to manage her life, and she tells herself that she is fine, completely fine. Eleanor has weekly phone conversations with her mummy. You get the sense that she doesn't look forward to these conversations. Uncharacteristically, she develops a friendship with Raymond, a coworker, who is kind and non-judgmental, and these qualities help her feel safe with him and to explore her past the way she hasn't before. Throughout the book, we learn that Eleanor has been through some trauma, and as a child, that's made her the way she is. By the end of the story, she is not completely fine, but her life has opened up and she begins to experience tiny bits of pleasure and begins to understand that life has more to offer. So did I miss any major plot points or information there?
No, it was great.
All right. I have to admit, I read this book originally when it was published in 2017, and in order to get ready for this event tonight, I reread it, and it is the first time in my life that I have ever read a book twice. So that was interesting for me. I'm kind of the thought that there's so many books to read, and working in a bookstore, you can imagine my stacks of book to read grow every year. But interestingly enough, when I read it the second time, I saw things that I didn't see before. And one major, don't judge me, thing that I missed, that I did not remember about this book, was that Eleanor has a scar on her face, which is important, I think, because I think it's the scar on her face is how she perceives that people perceive her when she encounters like strangers or someone that's seen her for the first time. Her dialogue in her head is about the scar. So it's interesting that I completely did not remember that about the book. But there you go. We would like to encourage the audience to put their questions or comments in the comment section so we can discuss them. And if there is not anything you have to add, Greta and Eva, we can get started on some discussion topics.
Well, to be totally honest, I actually kind of hated this book. So I want to start with what Eva has to say.
Oh my God. I thought you were leading into your long explanation about why you hate it. It's so funny because I read it pretty quickly. I think I read it in a weekend because it's definitely one of those books that feels like a character study, and you kind of get used to her and you kind of want to be with her, even though she has a lot of flaws and is really annoying in some parts. And it's really sad too. It's a sad book. So it was weird because I couldn't tell if I enjoyed reading it necessarily, but it was such an interesting dive into one character. And it actually reminded me a little bit of My Year of Rest and Relaxation, which I also read really quickly, in terms of how much you're in this interiority of the character. And you do kind of miss them at the end, even though you're left feeling very unsure at the end of it. So yeah, that was kind of my takeaway right off the bat.
Yeah, I think you are right that like the character definitely grew on me. I actually listened to it, which I did find like she has a pretty charming sense of humor. Once you kind of get used to her rhythms, I think there were some moments where I did kind of laugh out loud at how silly she was, which was fun. But I don't know. I think a big part of the problem for me with this book was that, you know how like it's so easy to judge a book by its cover. This is one of those, it was a Reese Witherspoon book club pick. Like a lot of like lovely white women in my life told me they thought it was a really great book. And so I just sort of like, I assumed it was like a cute, cozy, feel good, nice book. Like it reminded me of someone recently described Linda Holmes' book, Evie Drake Starts Over, as a cozy sweater recently on Twitter. And I loved that because like, I think now more than ever, a lot of us are reaching for stuff like that. And I really wanted Eleanor Oliphant to be a cozy sweater of a book, and it was not at all. I just picked it up a couple weeks ago because, you know, these are weird times. I was like, I want something simple and easy that I don't have to think about too hard, that's just like nice and fun and cute. And then I was like, this is intense. Like, this woman is deeply unlikable. She's gone through so much horrible stuff. The voice of this mother is terrible. I was just like, it was just not the book that I was looking for at this precise moment in time.
Well, I loved the book the first time I read it. I loved it more the second time I read it. But I do think, and I have found this a lot in reading books, I had no expectations because I found it on my own.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't recommended by a publisher or a friend or a customer. I found it on my own. I had zero expectations. So I was able to enjoy it without expectations. I think she began in the beginning, like you said, as an unlikable character. But there were many ways that I was able to relate to her and understand her. I mean, she was hilarious in her perception of things. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's very sad. It does, you know, deals with loneliness and mental illness, but it's also very funny. I know one of my favorite things that she in the book, she wrote, she wasn't actually chewing gum, but her demeanor was that of a gum chewer. Now, I could just completely relate to that sentiment.
Yeah, I think the way that she kind of skewers our social expectations or our social affectations is really funny. And maybe that was one part that kept me going. But then it is so sad because, she has this deep loneliness. So it's like I want to laugh with her, but then I feel really bad because she is relatable in some ways. But, there's that line where she says, there was, it seemed, no Eleanor shaped social hole for me to slot into. I think that's very relatable for a lot of people, or understandable at least. But then the book just takes you into a very deep, sad part of that, which I think I agree was hard to read at some points.
One thing I really liked about the audiobook is that it also pointed out the distinction between the fact that she's British and has an English accent and she's in Scotland, because the narrator would do Scottish accents for all of the other characters, which I think really helped emphasize the idea that both of you have mentioned too, that she's an outsider. It sort of just like brought that to another, because people are often sort of like asking her what her background is. And I think a lot of us to varying degrees sort of have that experience too of like, and often it is just out of like curious, like, oh, where are you from? But even that question can often be so isolating too, right? Like I thought they did a good job with those kinds of elements for sure.
We have a question from Erica K. And the question is, what did you think of the significance of food in the story? And use of imagery relating to candy, like the air inside the room is the palest sugar pink.
I mean, there's definitely that very obvious sort of comfort food when she first meets Raymond's mom. The soup that she's making, she seems to like the fact that it's from the vegetables that are in her garden. And then obviously she hates fast food, which is hilarious. And she expects like a certain level of service at this fast food restaurant. So I do think there's a little bit of food comfort kind of wrapped in that makes a little bit of sense. But in terms of the sort of narrative descriptions of spaces, that's a great question. I really did love that line. I remember highlighting that and just kind of thinking about sustenance and how we view certain kinds of flavors and textures, and how she was tying that into her environment in a way.
Well, and I think that is kind of a way that she opens up too, right? Because especially in the beginning, like she eats literally the same exact thing for each meal and each day. Like she has different stuff for each day of the week or whatever, but like she is not an adventurous, open-minded person, even when it comes to what she's going to eat. It's like the same thing. Tonight is pasta with pesto night, which, I think like as she sort of opens up and has more experiences, that shifts too, which is nice to see.
I'm just reminded of when when they went to visit Sammy in the hospital, like I think it was the second time, and they had decided, bring him something to eat, and she brought the most inappropriate food.
I think at one point she brings him kale, and he's like lifting his head and wondering what it is.
Wasn't there some sort of fish or something as well? Like it was just. She's just that. I mean, that was in a way that comes up time and time again in the book, where she just doesn't like understand, kind of the social norms or I don't know. I thought that was hilarious too.
Yeah, and it's weird now that I think about it, because I mean, I'm assuming there's no need for a spoiler alert, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So when we find out at the end that her mom has been gone for a long time, then I was confused about all those times that she said, oh, we only ate fancy food, or mom would never let me eat that. And I was like, was it mom or was it her? Was it her own kind of thing? I was confused about that for sure.
Well, I think it also introduces the possibility that she just made that up also, right? Because isn't that such a nicer story than a mother who tried to kill you and,
right.
starved you or whatever it is, right? Like that would be I could see how a person who experienced the trauma she did would have revised her past.
Right.
To include very fancy meals from a mother who insisted on only the highest caliber of food, right?
Right. I think I remember reading in the book though that it was like the most extreme in terms of like they wouldn't eat for days, and then they would have, crazy things. So that's what she thought was proper maybe also, and then just kind of built on that in her mind.
Yeah, and there's that funny scene where she supposedly, again, it's murky what happens or doesn't, but when she goes over to a friend's house and has just like a normal dinner and she doesn't know what it is, and she tells the mom and the kids like, well, we're usually having, escargot or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't even know what this is. I thought that was interesting in terms of that outsider, or kind of almost like the critique as a sort of armor for feeling like an outsider.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think she had difficulty adapting in her foster families also with what, they were serving what ordinary families would be eating. As a way of kind of hanging on to her past too, that like this is right and this is wrong. I think that she had challenges fitting in that way as well. I think we already answered the question about that how when we're introduced to the character, she's challenging and rude throughout, but we don't know her very well, and she just seems challenging and rude. And if you felt differently about the character at the end, and I think we all pretty much answered that.
I did not feel differently about her at the end, though. I mean, I don't think she went through an adequate redemption arc as a character, and I don't know, partly I was so confused by why so many people told me they liked this book. And so I did some Googling afterwards to just be like, am I the only person on earth who found this to be a very unpleasant experience? And there's this like blog post that's called like Eleanor Oliphant is trash or something like that.
Oh, boy.
And which is, intense. I definitely didn't feel that strongly about it, but she had a really good point, which is that like this character Eleanor obviously has some disordered drinking, right? Like if she's able to drink 2 bottles of liquor every weekend, like she's blacking out, like it's a problem, and she's able to quit drinking just like that, you know. And like there is some therapy stuff, but not like, I don't know, I would have loved to see more therapy, more like, I think a lot of what I found frustrating about her character is that she wasn't particularly vulnerable. She didn't open, and she opened up more than she did, and I guess she was more vulnerable than she had been, but it's like she had been so stringent and closed off before that like I just would have loved to see a little more in that direction.
That's so funny. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because sometimes I felt like the opposite. When she went over, oh, hi, cat.
That's tail.
When she went over to Raymond's mom's and started crying when she asked her about her family, I was like, that seems too soon. Why would she open up right at the first meeting? And then kind of like, I agree with you about the drinking. I was surprised that she was able to let it go, but I don't know. I mean, it's hard when you're, the book could have been another 100 pages or something just dealing with her therapy, but I actually felt like she opened up quickly.
Well, I think that kindness that she received from Raymond and his mother were like so unusual for her, and you know what I mean, that it just completely caught her off, like she wasn't used to being treated kindly like that. I think in my mind that explained it. I didn't leave the book thinking that she wasn't like, when she was done with the drinking or didn't have more I didn't leave the book thinking that she was better or well, or I felt like we left the book where she could see what was possible, and that in order to have these things and have this life, she was going to have choices to make and work to do. I didn't feel like, okay, well now Eleanor's completely fine. I felt like we left the book, I thought it was hopeful. I felt hopeful that once she kind of faced the trauma and the truth, that kind of cracked her open a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that. I guess I just have, I don't know. I also felt like she didn't become more likable necessarily. Like she was never really very kind to anyone, like, like, and the thing with Raymond, like he's so sweet to her, but like she's so abrupt with him all the time that like I never really understood why he would keep putting himself out. Like, what is he getting out of their friendship, And so like that kind of got to me too, where it was like, I think if it had felt like she really developed like an intimate, vulnerable relationship with someone where he was helping her and she was helping him, and they were both sort of like figuring out their stuff, and it just felt like I just would have loved a little more development in that area, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I will say I was glad that they didn't end up becoming romantic because I was waiting for it. I was like, no, please don't let this turn into some weird like romantic story or like a rom-com situation, because there were these little hints where she would, want to hold him for longer or want to like hold his hand and stuff or would wonder about it. And I was like, oh, I really don't want it to happen. So I was kind of glad that it didn't, because I think it's more interesting that way, where they just retain this kind of dysfunctional friendship, like you said, where
That's
she seems to be
funny.
receiving. But I'm so glad. I was like, oh, thank God they didn't, end up hooking up at the end of this book.
That's hilarious. I read it as that they were gonna hook up for sure.
Oh, that's funny. That's so funny, because that was the question I had. Do you think the author meant that they were now going to be romantically involved, or were they going to continue with the platonic friendship? I wished for them a platonic friendship.
I mean, I read it that they were going. I wished they were not friends at all. And I read it that like, because he broke up with what's her face because she was too high maintenance, and so I totally read it as like he asked her on a date and she was very happy to accept.
Oh, damn. I was optimistic, I guess.
I mean, either way, like, I guess if they're happy together or, or as friends, like, we'll call it a win.
Yeah. True. I know, it was really funny that, she also was comparing herself a lot to, I'm trying to remember her name. What was the hairstylist's name?
Oh, yeah, what, Marilyn?
Laura?
Laura?
Oh, yeah, Laura, yeah. So she was comparing herself a lot to Laura, and then it didn't work out, and it was this whole thing. And it was interesting in terms of kind of social commentary when she went into the salon to get her hair done by Laura, because she talks a lot about how women are expected to look a certain way, or presenting people are expected to look a certain way, and like that gets you friends. And I think that's very valid. But then at the same time, she has this really awesome experience at the salon because she feels like she's taken care of. And I thought that was interesting because it is very real. Sometimes you're like, oh, I don't want to spend money on hair or nails. I don't want to buy into this. But then at the same time, it is, relaxing when you're in the right setting. So I thought that was a funny scene.
Yeah, no, you're right. That is a really good point too, because there are a couple of other scenes that are similar to that, where like she goes to buy clothes that are not, it seems like she dresses pretty frumpily in the beginning. It's sort of like blouse and long skirt, and she like goes shopping and gets some hip stuff, and she like goes to the makeup counter at the department store. And those are really fascinating scenes because I do think they really like embody the contradiction that you're talking about exactly, Eva, where it's like, to a certain extent, like, yes, we're treating ourselves, and how nice to like feel good and know you look good, but also like, what even is that,
Right. It's not necessary to have it's not necessary, but it obviously was something that she found and that she enjoyed.
And that did help her integrate, that like, like other people asked her about where she got her clothes, which had never happened before. And
right. We have a question from Rosalind. I missed, let's see, her question is, were you surprised about the status of the mother at the very end? And Rosalind says she was surprised. Did you guys know that she was not alive?
No.
I feel like I'm giving something away, but that's why we're here, right? It's like somehow saying not alive is not saying that she was dead. Okay, let's just.
She was not
guys. Did that surprise you?
I was surprised by that. I predicted the sister thing, like that there was a sister and something had gone terribly wrong, because there were a couple of hints of that throughout. But yeah, the mom thing was a surprise.
Yeah, I thought her mom was calling from like a prison or something.
Yeah, that's what I thought the whole time. And I was also I was thrown off because in terms of the sort of mental health through line of the narrative, I was with her the whole time and kind of, we see her go to therapy, etc. But then at the end, to just drop that, I was thinking, well, now what's going on? Is she going to need a prescription? Is she going to need more help? Like, it just really felt like she tossed us into this. And then it's like, okay, bye. She'll be fine. I was like, no, I don't know what's going to happen.
We have another question from our audience. Erica K asked, oh, sorry, I already read that one. Amy Miller asks, why does Eleanor need to be kind or likable? My read of her relationship with Raymond was that he was just kind of amused by her strangeness, and he was also sort of socially awkward, just not as socially awkward. Maybe it made him feel more normal.
That's a fair question. I think for me, I mean, especially as I mentioned, like I came to this book 2 weeks ago looking for something really like comfortable, which this book just is not. I also generally don't like unlikable characters. Like I don't enjoy reading a book if I'm not like along for the ride with the protagonist and voting for them. Or if I like if it's an unlikable protagonist, I want them to be like I want it to be like a trashy murder mystery or like soap opera stuff. And this is kind of like weird middle ground. It sort of reminds me, I don't know if you guys read The Pisces, which came out last spring. I forget who wrote it, but it's just like, and it's a kind of a similar thing actually, where the protagonist like obviously has like some like mental like issues that need some kind of treatment and are unresolved. And it just like is icky for me. Like it's totally just my personal preference.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is something to be said about maybe the gender dynamics of likability, especially in terms of contrasting Raymond and Eleanor. I guess for me, the only moments that perhaps made her more unlikable was when she was so critical of other people. Although again, in a way that is its own commentary.
That's super bitchy, you know?
Exactly. It's so bitchy, but it's also like, well, it's not like any of us can say we're angels necessarily in that department. I think what was more kind of the sort of investigation of the book was why is she doing that, and why does she start to kind of have this dialogue with herself where she's like, no, that's not very nice, or no, maybe you shouldn't say that. And even her and Raymond becoming close almost didn't happen because she was like, I don't want to help this guy out who fell, he's drunk. I don't want to deal with it. And so I don't know, it was just very back and forth for me. But I think her being unlikable maybe was interesting to me because I wanted to see what would happen. I wanted to see if she would change by the end of it.
I have been thinking about what was Raymond's, what was he getting out of this? And I really I don't have an answer to that, but I think Amy is saying it for me, that he was amused by her strangeness. And, they were both a bit quirky, and they're quirky. He thought it fit. I will say that I love to despise my characters. Love it. I don't always, but I don't have to like my characters, which generally makes the books I like from my friends like diverge greatly. Let's see. The book deals a lot with loneliness. Some have said that is kind of the underlying theme of the book. Do you think we are living in a time, and we have to kind of separate this before COVID-19, are we living in a time where we have generated greater degrees of loneliness?
Oh yeah. I mean, like, I think I've actually done a fair number of interviews about this over the course of my career. The thesis statement that I've come up with is that social media has just as much power to connect us as it does to isolate us. It's just about what we do with it. And so, yeah, I mean, but like, if you look at, like the whole bowling alone thing, or like church attendance, or, even like, do you know your neighbors? Like, I think I think in general, we tend to like close in on ourselves. And this was even before the pandemic. But I don't know. I mean, I also I walked the dog today, and when people would stop well before the corner so that I could cross the street and everyone was far away, I waved thanks and they waved back. And it's I live in Chicago. We don't normally just wave at each other when we're walking by. So I don't know. I kind of I live alone. My thought is that I'm going to try to reach out and have as many connections as possible while of course still being safe, because what else do we have?
Yeah, it's interesting thinking about social media, because that's how she starts to kind of fabricate this fantasy about her and her musician bae. So, there's a lot of, again, social media connecting you and not, because at some point she thinks to herself, oh, I'm not caught up on my research because I went to this party. She was having these IRL experiences, but kind of taking them for granted because she wanted to do more research on social media about this person that she didn't even know. And I think a lot of times that does happen. We tend to compare ourselves to people we don't know. We tend to feel like we're missing out when we very much have all the control to, call someone over for dinner or go out and take a walk. Obviously pre all of this madness, but I do think that is an interesting part of the story for sure.
We have a question from Suzanne. Suzanne's question is, did Eleanor's story help you feel more understanding of or empathetic toward people who seem on the surface at least weird? I think I feel like I'm weird, so
I was gonna say, like,
wrong demographic.
You do have to recognize that everyone can be weird in their own way. So I do think I was empathetic for her. And even if there wasn't the trauma that caused her to be so like closed off and the way she dealt with people and just keeping them, arm's distance, I still felt like I would be empathetic towards her.
Yeah, I love weirdos. I'm delighted by them.
Yeah, and I think it's so funny. I mean, I just come back to the moments where she's very real. Like all the intra-office interactions are really funny to me because it's like sometimes you just don't want to be part of those conversations and it is seen as weird, but and again, going back to the gender thing, I feel like it's also, if you're femme presenting, people expect you to be very kind and nice and sweet at work, and it's like she just wanted to get her job done and go home. It's like that is very much relatable sometimes. So yeah,
she definitely did not want to participate in the office politics or gossip. She had no use for that. So if you were to have an Eleanor in your life, this is kind of goes along with our being empathetic. If you have an Eleanor in your life, do you think it could be someone you could be friends with? I mean, especially given the directness and her kind of lack of a filter.
I don't know. I have a hard time with that question because I don't know like what an Eleanor is, like I certainly have very close friends who have dealt with like very intense childhood trauma, but are some of the kindest, most generous, flexible, friendly people I know. And so I don't know, like, you know what I mean? I'm not sure. What do you think, Eva?
Yeah, I'm not sure either because I also thought that her particular character, a lot of her internal dialogue, and even some of her external dialogue could be a lot of people's internal dialogue.
Totally.
So it kind of depends, what level of friendship are we talking about? Because obviously you have friends where you maybe don't tell them everything you think, and you have other ones where you're a little more comfortable. So I don't know. I mean, I try not to be quick to judge, so I guess it would really depend.
Yeah. What about you, Bridget?
I think I'm sensitive. She could be a little mean with her, you know what I mean? Her comments were kind of hurtful and biting. And I think while I could be friends with someone, I might, might choose to not hang out with them all the time. I feel like I don't think that could be a constant in my life. Like
you would need good boundaries.
Yeah, I would have my feelings hurt all the time. Okay, Diane asked, do you think this book has valuable commentary on the demands of social conformity?
I mean, that's interesting because one way you could read this book is that things are easier for you when you conform.
Right. And I so didn't want to like her or feel like she had, come on this journey and got somewhere just because she was conforming. I don't want to think that about myself.
I don't know though. I think maybe there is a way to read it where it's not actually conformity as much as it's about finding common ground.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
she does ultimately kind of, she tries and discards a lot of experiences, right? She hates the nail salon. I mean, she was very bitchy about it. But she finds out manicures are not her thing, so I don't feel like she completely conforms. It's not a Princess Diaries kind of
She's all that.
yeah, throw
The
that.
Cinderella
But
story.
yeah, so I mean, in some ways, maybe, but I also like to think that it's kind of about finding what works because she didn't completely say, okay, I want to look like a Kardashian now, and then everyone will love me.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, in a way, you can look at it like getting the haircut and buying herself, clothes. I mean, she was just finding a way to take care of herself. Was she conforming in that way? I don't know. I mean, she was doing a bit of self-care there.
Yeah.
But it's definitely, I mean, I don't want to like it for that reason. I was very aware that that was something that I wanted to stay away. I didn't want to like it for that reason. We have a question from Lauren. Did anyone else feel secondhand embarrassment while reading this book? Oh my goodness.
The worst.
It made me look at myself for a second, and I see why I was feeling that way. I have a friend who I recommended this book to, and she doesn't like books where she feels that she can't read them. She was like, no, I had to put it down. That's so funny.
Yeah.
You just have to power through.
Yeah, I do feel like there was a lot of, or secondhand awkwardness too. Not even if it wasn't full embarrassment, it was just kind of feeling awkward along with her. And I think that was hard. But I don't know, it's interesting when she does get to therapy. I think some of the insights that she has remind me of when I first started going to therapy, and some of them were pretty on the nose, just in terms of, when she says, and then she cut off our time and she threw me out the door like I was a dog into the street, and I was like, yeah, I feel that. Like, it happens sometimes. You're like, I wasn't ready.
Right.
Yeah, there were these little kind of nuggets of humor, wisdom that I liked.
The biggest secondhand embarrassment when she went to actually go to the concert, when she in her mind thought how I was holding my breath, like this is going to end so badly for her. I mean, and it did, but not in a way that was, she didn't have to interact with him and get rejected in that sort of way. So I was so embarrassed for her, like the way that she was thinking when she went, and I was holding my breath on that one. I think we touched on this one a little bit. Eleanor makes changes to her life and begins to say yes to new experiences. Do you think, however, her overall view of the world changes by the end of the book?
Yeah, I do. I mean, we kind of talked about that. I think what's hopeful is that she the big change is that she actually is willing to tell herself what actually happened to her, right? And to try to heal herself from there. And it seems like, yeah, she's more, I think it's true that she's like more open to new experiences, more willing to try new stuff. Which is,
I mean, I don't know about her worldview, but I do think that, or I hope that in seeing the kindness, that is given to her by other people, that she sees how that she then maybe becomes a kinder person herself because she's experiencing that she's the recipient of that kindness. So I'm hoping in that way, she becomes a kinder person, I guess. I don't know about her worldview though. That's big.
That is a big one.
I agree. I mean, I think it's interesting, in terms of how she thinks of her home, how it's very kind of insulated. She says she's never had anyone over. By the end of the book, she has this new cat, which of course I was very happy about. As a cat lady myself. And, she starts inviting Raymond and his mom over and thinking about all these little things, like what crackers, biscuits she has, tea she has. So I think even that small thing for her seems really big. So that seems like it was a change.
We have a question from Kelly Jones. Kelly asks, do you feel like the quality of her life was better at the end after the changes? I was hoping that was the case and it was the redeeming quality for me in reading the book. Sounds like Kelly kind of felt like hopeful at the end also.
I mean, yeah, I think all the things that Eva just pointed out in terms of quality of life, like she's got a cat, people are coming over, therapy, like it's, you know, it's going to be challenging for her, I would assume, but like she's on the right track for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think outwardly, or like at least from this external point of view, she does have a lot of things set up in place that she didn't before. And also, I think just kind of starting to let other people in and starting to deal with, I think it was big when Sammy died. I think also having to deal with loss now when she's trying to kind of recover from her own trauma.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I don't think it's going to be easy, but I definitely saw some sort of change.
One of the things that I was reading that people did not like about the book, and I'm curious to ask you this, is that they felt like we were laughing at Eleanor and not laughing at the people who, you know, who were perceiving Eleanor a certain way, that we were that it was cruel, and that we as the audience, as the readers, were laughing at her. I never felt like I was laughing at her, but it was kind of like I was laughing, like you would laugh at yourself for, you know, social blunders and things, little mistakes that you make. I didn't feel like it was done in a cruel way. Did you have that experience at all?
What do you think, Eva?
I don't think I fully had that experience, no. Because again, some of her internal dialogue, I think, is things that some of us have probably thought at one point or another, or she goes down these rabbit holes where she has all these random facts about, you know, diseases and like just random things. And I'm like, I get that. We all go down a Wikipedia hole. And again, I don't know, I guess it depends on your experience, but with The Office, you know, the way that she portrays some of her coworkers, I felt like we were supposed to laugh at them for sure.
Right.
Like, even though she didn't understand when they were making fun of her sometimes, I think it was still kind of pointing out that they just didn't have anything else to do besides criticize her and gossip and all that.
Yeah, I do wonder, especially in the context of Raymond, like I forget exactly how that question was phrased earlier, but the idea that like maybe she didn't have to be kind to him because he just kind of got a kick out of her, like that makes me a little uncomfortable. I think especially like because we end up knowing so much about her trauma and like, I don't know, I mean, there's some hints at like maybe her being on the spectrum as well. And like those are issues that should be taken pretty seriously. And I don't know, I do worry about that a little bit.
We have time to take Diane's question, and then we're going to wrap up for this evening. Diane asks, there were many well-written quotable passages. What were some of your favorites?
Ooh. Let me take
I already gave you mine about the gum chewer. I want to use that in my life. Not necessarily about gum chewing either. No offense to gum chewers.
There's so many good ones. Oh, okay, here's one. Popular people sometimes have to laugh at things they don't find very funny, do things they don't particularly want to, with people whose company they don't particularly enjoy. Not me. I had decided years ago that if the choice was between that or flying solo, then I'd fly solo. It was safer that way. Grief is the price we pay for love, so they say. The price is far too high. I was just like,
I like that passage also.
So good.
I think some of my favorite moments were actually when she was like talking smack about Raymond and like the abbreviations he would use in emails. And I forget it was just like, why is this a thing that's happening? And I just found that to be pretty playful.
She was so proud of herself when she was ever to like.
Oh yeah. And then she started doing it.
Yeah, she tried doing it and she was like, it feels so unnatural.
Like, okay, Eleanor.
Yeah.
Can I ask you two a question before we go?
Sure.
I just thought it would be fun for each of us to maybe recommend another book for listeners who, you know, are excited that they followed along with this and are looking for something else to read now.
Ooh, that's hard.
I'm gonna put y'all on the spot.
I have one. I wish I knew the author. I'm not even sure if it's out yet. I believe it is about to come out or has just come out. But it's called The Girl with the Louding Voice. And because it's been so long since I read about it, I'm going to completely incorrectly state where it takes place. It is a wonderful book. I wish I could remember the author's name. I believe she might be it might be her first book as well. Google it, The Girl with the Louding Voice. Loved it.
Okay, so if you do want to laugh, I'm going to recommend Wow, No Thank You by Samantha Irby, which just came out.
Chicago author.
Read it in a weekend, but it's that kind of book where you don't want to read it that quickly because you want to just savor her very gross, honest sense of humor. And it's such a good read, especially for now when you need to get your mind off things.
Yeah, Samantha is a delight. We've had her on Nerdette a couple of times, actually.
Oh my God, I love it.
For sure. I think, well, so I mentioned Evie Drake Starts Over a couple times. That one's by Linda Holmes. It came out last summer. It's just like the lovely rom-com that you need in your life. And it actually, the therapy storyline in that one, I think is really, really well done. I also, one of my favorite books from last year is called Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. And that's one where actually like, it's such an unrealistic premise. This woman is asked to take care of 2 10-year-old twins who, when they get really upset, they light on fire. Just
my God.
Obviously not real life, but everything else in the book is real life. And it's like so unbelievable, but every single step of the way, every decision she makes, I'm like, it's completely believable. And you're just like, of course, that's what I would do too. Like you just put them in the swimming pool all day and then there's no problem. It's just like such a great book. And I think it would be an extra pleasure to read right now too.
Cool.
Very good. Well, this was fun.
Yeah.
Thank you everyone for joining us. Our physical stores, Vroman's are temporarily closed right now, but be sure to visit our website, vromansbookstore.com. In addition to our online store, we are hosting many virtual live author events and conversations. Greta, where can people find you?
People can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Nerdette Podcast and at Greta M. Johnsen.
Eva, how about you?
You can check out my website, evarecinos.com, or follow me on Instagram, little Eva, because I'm exactly 4 feet 11 inches.
You are not. That's amazing. I can't tell from here.
Oh, you know, I know how to angle the laptop.
Zoom is the level playing ground, the equalizer. Yeah. Well, thanks again for joining us, and have a great night. Take care. Bye.